everyone, my name's Katrina and I'm an accountant here at WealthMed. So in this webinar today, I'll be discussing the end of the JobKeeper scheme, what's next for businesses and how they can prepare for a future without JobKeeper. So throughout 2020, the JobKeeper payment scheme was a lifeline for many businesses and individuals alike. So the government actually designed the scheme to help prevent business closures and job losses, and assisted to provide vital cash flow to cover operational costs, retain employees and ride out the lockdown periods, which I'm sure many of you are also familiar with those lockdown periods. So as many of you may also be aware, the JobKeeper payment program will be ending on the 28th of March 2021, which is coming up very, very quickly. So basically, any employers that are currently on the JobKeeper program are not required to do anything at the moment. So when the program ends, you're not required to do anything specifically. However, you will need to complete your final March monthly business declaration in April 2021. So that's the only thing that you'll need to do. So we understand that JobKeeper ending will bring uncertainty to some businesses and their employees. So what's next, you may ask? Basically, businesses need to plan for what will happen for when their cash safety nets are removed. How will they cover their costs? How will they adjust their operations? And how will they continue to grow their revenue? It is also especially important for employers that are thinking about restructuring their business and workforce for the future, that they do understand the risks and steps that need to be taken, especially if an employer is planning to make any employees redundant, unfortunately. So it is very important that if restructuring and redundancies are actually being considered, that employers do understand the steps that need to be taken to minimize any potential claims and risk. So there are resources available for this, including experienced employment lawyers who can be of assistance to you if required. So there will actually be no scheme that will replace JobKeeper in its entirety. However, there are other financial incentives for employers that the government has recently introduced in their 2020-2021 financial budget. So one of these schemes is called the JobMaker Hiring Credit Scheme. So this scheme actually provides businesses with an incentive to take on additional employees aged between 16 and 35 years old. So we actually estimate that around 450,000 positions of young Australians will be supported through the JobMaker Hiring Credit Scheme, which is pretty incredible. So I will be going into a little bit more detail in relation to the criteria required to meet for this JobMaker Hiring Credit Scheme and a couple more little notes that you should be aware of. So eligible employers can access the JobMaker Hiring Credit Scheme for each eligible employee they hire between the 7th of October 2020 and the 6th of October 2021. So what is the eligibility criteria of this? So essentially there are two forms of criteria that you must meet in order to receive the JobMaker Hiring Credit Scheme. So basically the first criteria is that you must be an eligible employer, and the second criteria is that you must hire an eligible employee. So I thought I'd also quickly note that we have attached a helpful PDF document as a downloadable link in this email provided with this webinar, which provides a detailed breakdown of the criteria you will need to meet as an employer, and also criteria that employees must meet to be eligible for this scheme. The purposes of this webinar today, I will just be touching slightly on the criteria required for employees to be eligible for the scheme. However, as mentioned, if you'd like to read up a little bit more in detail about criteria for both employers and employees, please have a look at that PDF document. It'll outline everything that you need to know. So basically, a couple of important points that you'll need to know as an employer to ensure that you are hiring an eligible employee for this scheme include, so firstly, that the employee must be aged between 16 to 35 years old at the time that they started employment. So the second form of criteria is that they must have received either a job seeker payment, parenting payment, or youth allowance payment for at least 2 consecutive weeks. And the third form of criteria is that employees must also declare that they have not filled in a JobMaker employee notice for another employer that they are working for, if they are working for someone else. It's also very important to note that employees must work a minimum of at least 20 paid hours a week, averaged over a quarter. So basically, eligible employers will receive $200 per week if they hire an eligible employee aged between 16 to 29 years, or they will receive $100 per week if they hire an eligible employee aged between 30 to 35 years old. The JobMaker hiring credit will also be available for up to 12 months from the date of employment of the eligible employee. Please also note that as the employer, you do keep the hiring credit, so the money from received, and you can obviously then pay for the employees for the hours that they work. So you do not have to pass on the money that you do receive under this scheme to the employee. You do retain that money, and then you can invest that further into your business growth. And as also mentioned, if you'd like to read up a little bit more about this, please have a look at that PDF that we have included in this webinar link as well for you. So in summary, the current priority is to secure a strong and sustained economic recovery, which will help to drive the unemployment rate down as far as possible. So the government is directing its focus on the economic recovery plan, which also includes tax cuts, business incentives, and the JobMaker hiring credit scheme as we have discussed today in this webinar. So I'd like to thank you all for attending the webinar with me today. So I hope I have assisted to provide some insight in relation to what we can expect now that the JobKeeper scheme is ending so soon, and a little bit of an insight in relation to the new JobMaker hiring credit scheme that the government has recently introduced. So as always, if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to contact us here at WealthMed in the accounting team. We'd love to help you out with anything that you need. And if you'd like to chat about whether your business is eligible for this new JobMaker hiring credit scheme, we would love to assist. So thanks again.